Hello and welcome to Roll for Conversation. Once again, you join us for group therapy, shared despair, and holistic screaming into the void. All while proudly being woke as fuck. Mark, Ian, how you both doing?
I'm very well. How are you, Mark?
I'm also very well. Ben, are you well?
Yeah, as well as anyone can be on a Sunday.
Do you have beef with Sundays?
You're giving me flashbacks of going to school more than anything. I don't know whether it felt like when I was a young, Sundays were the most despair. Whereas, I don't know, maybe these days it gets to about 2 a.m. and that's when I feel true despair because I'm just distracted by doing shit but then, yeah, maybe as I go to bed, I'm like, oh, I have to do work tomorrow. So, I don't know.
No, I think for me, when I was small, it was a little bit of a combination of both. Sundays were always church days, and then I would have to prep everything to get ready for school. Fortunately, I don't really have to be too focused on going to church or anything these days. But like I said, Ian, I stay up a little bit too late, and then suddenly I realize I have not had enough hours of sleep ahead of work. But we're creative. Us creatives must suffer at some point or something for the things that we love.
Yeah, I feel like something you said there has made me think that one thing that I probably just don't do is I don't really prep. So therefore, I don't know if I have that same sort of thing. But also, I think that maybe since I started working jobs where I more or less work remotely for most of the week, Sunday doesn't have the same kind of terror for me as it once had. Obviously, I'm in London, and knowing that I would have to get up in the morning and then get on a tube early to go into the office was pure terror. Whereas now it's like, not to give the fucking game away to anyone that might listen to this that I work with, but I wake up and then I send a message in Slack to say good morning, and then I go for a shit and do things, and then I assume.
Well, you don't want to send it at the same time.
Yes. So Sundays don't have the same terror for me anymore, but it's part of the benefit from working from home, I guess. But what has people been doing with their week since last week? What has do? Past tense.
I suppose Mark and I have started a little buddy read of literally the most inaccessible book that I know in my history personally.
That was a very kind of soft, gentle way of describing what I, as someone that doesn't read anything because I've lost the ability to do so, see as slightly masochistic. Would that be the right term?
100%.
Psychotic endeavor.
100%.
Tell us about this fucking demented book, Ben.
So, for reference, everyone, I'm holding the book in my hand, and it is Mark C. Danielewski's. I'm not going to say magnum opus because he might have written something a lot more impressive and or
that
terrifying.
Is more magnum and more opusy since.
Really
by accident.
Spoilers. But yes, it is House of Leaves. Now, for reference, I've had this book since I finished university, I think, in 2016. And it has been a doorstop and various accommodations where I've lived. But now Mark has decided that he's going to read it. And I let slip that I have a copy. And suddenly I find myself looking at an academic text / epistolary novel. I'm not entirely sure what it is. There are some music notes in one of these pages for reference. It is a very, very experimental, I would say, type of book. But yeah, Mark, how has it been going for you?
Good. So the conceit is that there's a film called, is it the Navidson Event or something like that, that may or may not actually exist. And there's a guy called Zampano that died in his flat. And when this guy called Johnny Truant went to the flat with his mate and found Zampano dead, there was also a trunk full of just like loads of writing that this Zampano guy had done about the Navidson event. So it's like the text that Zampano created in various states of madness before his death about this film that's just completely mental and might not exist, as sort of compiled by Johnny Truant, but also with editors that never actually met Johnny Truant. So there's footnotes to all of Zampano's work that sometimes are references to real works and sometimes are stuff that Truant says that Zampano just invented completely. Some of them footnotes are actually Truant commenting on what's gone on, and then some of the footnotes are the editors commenting on either Truant or Zampano's references to his own work, which is about this film that might not exist. So it's quite simple, really.
It sounds, I mean, a few thoughts I have when I hear you there is that it kind of sounds like the found footage of...
It feels like a found footage book, yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
And the other thing I'm thinking is that, like, I mean, I would struggle to concentrate on what you said anyway because it's just, there's a lot going on.
Lot, yeah.
But I swear, is there not a band called Johnny Truant?
I think there is.
Quite possibly. I've got a mechanical keyboard, so it's too loud for me to try and Google, but
I've got a mechanical keyboard, but I don't give a fuck about who's listening to this. Listen to me clack.
Is his name Johnny Truant?
There is a band.
Maybe I've just gotten confused and called him that because of the band.
They are a British metalcore band formed in 2000 under the name Severance. And wasn't the book written in...
The band recorded 3 demos under this moniker before renaming themselves after one of the main characters of novel House of Leaves. There we go.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah. There's always
everything is connected.
A band.
We need to go deeper. But yes, we won't go deeper into House of Leaves because I reckon, like Zampano, we might descend into madness.
Yes, quite. Yeah. Well, I look forward to it at any rate.
I'm looking forward to sort of like watching this develop because obviously you've kind of been in our WhatsApp group, you've sort of been sending back like backwards and forwards like little images of you holding this book or reading parts of it, and it feels like slightly threatening, like you're egging each other on to do something,
each other to go into the house.
I mean, I'm not a ready type person. That's exactly the technical term for someone that likes to read. But even I have heard of I've heard of this book's kind of reputation as unwieldy and kind of demented. So if it reaches me, then it must be everything that everyone has sort of, said it was going to be. So anyway, I look forward to hearing more about the madness in the future episodes, I guess. Me on the flip side, I've done something that was the kind of polar opposite of sitting down and intelligently reading the book, is that I played Doom the Dark Ages from start to finish in 2 days. And I just smashed the shit out of
it looks
demons.
And sounds absolutely class from what you've said.
Hold that thought because I liked it so much that I have decided, and I've already written the script for it, but I will make one of my Why I Love series videos about it, which seems quite quickly to love something, but I think that because I never really finish any games that I start, the fact that like any game that I do finish, I feel like automatically goes into that kind of category, like Avowed. Although Avowed, there was a lot of things around it and what I felt that it signified in amongst the modern gaming landscape, which gave it that. Whereas this, as I write in the script, this is a much more pure and honest like love, where it's just like I just really enjoyed the game. And it is on Game Pass, so you can both try it. Ben, I know that gives you like fucking hives or something because you've just got too many other games. I've got too many other games, but it is relatively quick to finish.
I do like
And
Doom.
I just played it through on whatever I just clicking next. So I think I done it on the lowest form of difficulty, which I assume just is the standard form of difficulty. But my theory on this is that that's the intended way to play it. You play it through the first time, because I only died once in the whole game.
Oh, shit.
And that was because I didn't know what I was sort of supposed to do in a room. And so I just kind of fell in some hurty water where it was made of something that hurt me. And I just decided, rather than try and find a way out, I decided it was better to die, start again at the checkpoint, and then reassess things. Because I also, in the process of trying to figure out this room, I basically burnt through all of my ammo and everything. So anyway, so I died and I let myself die. But otherwise, I didn't die the whole way through it, right to the end. It was challenging, but I feel like you play it through that way first. You experience the ridiculous sort of like almost 80s action camp sci-fi fantasy story and the power fantasy of just sort of like wrecking everything. Like, you are so heavy and fucking mighty that when you get like the low level enemies like imps and stuff like that, if you just jump off of something and land on the floor, your very presence is so weighty that you just obliterate everything around you. So you just blow things into like mist with your like impact of you landing. Yeah, exactly.
It's my vibes.
So
it's just blowing people away.
There are then another 6 or so levels of difficulty, and you can change the game speed as well. It's like an accessibility feature, which of course some people have had a fucking cry about, because you can't make a game more easy so that people can all enjoy it. But that's,
yeah, why make it enjoyable?
but yeah, I just really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the ridiculousness. I won't say anything about it, but if after a while you don't try it and you want to know, I can give you a bullet pointed list of like the various escalating ridiculous set pieces that happen within the game and the way in which it kind of comes about. But just everything is very extra and everything's ridiculous. And as I said, I think me and you were discussing, Mark, it has that thing where it's so fucking stupid, but it takes itself 100% seriously.
Yeah.
Like, it's not going like, oh, wink, wink, we're being stupid here. It just goes, no, but this is the Doomslayer. This is how this shit works. And
You don't want that like post-2000s meta irony kind of, oh, isn't this it? You want full bore kind of nonsense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing I said in my script is it has some, well, saying retro now feels a bit weird to me, because things have become retro when like, these things happened in my early 20s. But remember, in your Xbox 360 era of, say, action adventure games, you'd always have these little bits where it would put you on rails, and you would fly something, and it would break up the sort of like moment to moment combat by having a little bit where you fly something or you're on rails and you've got to shoot something. Like, just these, I don't know how to describe them, but they kind of break up play that in reality they could have been there purely so that the game can load shit in the background for the next part that you go into or something. But the way it presents itself, the way it does everything is pretty, it's just really enjoyable and just very over the top. And I instantly loved it so much that I just played it all from start to finish in 2 nights and then just wrote a script about it, and now I'll make a video. So stand by for that. But yeah, has anyone else been playing anything else this week?
I've restarted Book of Hours because I can't stop playing it and just really like it. So, and it will probably, the vibes go hand in hand with House of Leaves, I think, and that's sort of getting too far down a rabbit hole of something completely occult and esoteric, which appeals to me.
Now, you've already played that a lot before deciding to open Book of Hours, but House of Leaves.
Yeah,
Book of Leaves and House of Hours. But
Book of House.
Did House of Leaves inform your decision to, like when I watch a good game of football on TV and then I think like, oh, I'm going to play some Football Manager or FIFA. Like I still do that at 42. 42? Fucking hell, I've been very generous to myself there. At 45 years of age, I just wiped years off myself. Oh, that's made me feel sad as well. Kind of even at 45, I was basically doing the same thing I used to do when I was a kid. Like I'd watch Clash of the Titans and then I'd immediately have to go upstairs and play with my He-Man figures and kind of recreate that. So we never truly grow up. We just get more expensive and strange toys to play with.
Yes. Well, I mean, I've known about House of Leaves for not since it was out by any stretch of the imagination, but like a good 10 years or so, and just never summoned the attention span to actually commit to reading it. And then, I got really into Book of Hours and was looking into that. And it turns out the guy that wrote Book of Hours was heavily influenced by House of Leaves. And there's a couple of surnames that crop up as those particular beams converge. So it's the settings and the ideas are different, but the vibes are very like, I've seen the face and gone mad kind of thing, which is very much my genre of media.
Is it a deck builder or is it a roguelike? Because I know that you don't particularly like roguelikes, or is it none of those things? And I have no idea of what Book of Hours is at all.
It's not. All the stuff you can do is done by combining cards in various ways, but it's not
right.
They're just like representative of skills and items and shit like that. It's not really a roguelike because you do go through from like beginning to end, slowly increasing things, and there's no sort of like repetition mechanic where you start at the start of something again.
So you're not doing runs.
It's just very, very vibes based.
You keep intriguing me. You're like I feel like I might have added it to my Steam wish list, but again, like where Ben got like fucking an anxiety attack when I started going, Ben, there's Doom the Dark Ages is out. I don't quite get the same thing as that, but I do look upon it as like I know that this is in another tier of games that interest me, which puts it behind other things. Like I have to finish Expedition 33 after this because I'm enough into it. Ben's just started like holding his head.
I'm still in Act 1, Ian. Like, and then you started talking to me about Doom. I just don't. There's so many games, man.
You just got to juggle them around. Like Doom: The Dark Ages is a great little break from Expedition 33, which for me was a great little break from grinding World of Warcraft Classic. So it's just about giving yourself little breaks, Ben, depending on what I mean, as long as you can get back into them. That's the difficult thing for me. As I then, if I leave a game for too long, then I won't open it again. That's pretty much what happened with Doom Eternal. I started playing it. I was like, oh, this is okay. It's a little bit different from Doom 2016. And then for some reason, something else came along. I didn't open it again, and then I never played it again.
I will say that Book of Hours is such like it's almost like I want to say it's like a mobile game, but it is that sort of thing where you can just kind of drop in and out of it as you want, and there's no real peril or risk to forgetting. It's not like fucking Dark Souls where if you don't play it for a day, you've lost your muscle memory.
I do like games that...
Me
is
too.
it a game... Answer this, right? Is it a game that I can play one-handed, not in that way, whilst I watch the TV, or do you have to be totally immersed in it? Like I play Teamfight Tactics, which I know is a very different game to that, but the idea is there's an element of like, it's just kind of like a strategy. It's not obviously an action game where like again, if we go back to Doom, The Dark Ages, the whole time I'm playing that, I have to be like physically present with both hands fully involved, whereas like can I sort of like a bit like Football Manager, can I sit back in my chair and ponder things and just make choices around strategies?
Pretty much, yeah, because there's like tasks take X amount of seconds and you can speed time up if you want. Like whenever I get something started that takes 60 seconds, I always put it to 4 times the speed and get to the end of it, but you can just have it run in various bits. There is a lot of reading, because you are the librarian, and a lot of it's about reading the books that they have, but you don't have to read what's in them. A lot of the satisfaction is just in unlocking all the rooms in the house.
Okay. Is it reasonably priced? Because I feel like what we could start doing in general is like having almost like as we all do like games, having some kind of version of a book club with things like indie games. If a game's like 20 quid, I am not going to quibble about buying it. So for some of these games, we could all like give it a go, and then
it's $19.99.
There we go. I will,
Leaves you with a penny change.
I will add that to Steam, and I will endeavour to purchase it and buy
Fantastic.
it. Maybe not until I've done Clair Obscur, but
no, fair.
Yeah, maybe that'll be a fun little feature to sort of like book club, as it were, some like indie titles.
Yes.
But
fun.
Ben, have you still been playing? Like you were worried about like not having enough time for games and new games.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, have you still been playing the game that you've already played through once? And are you still playing Baldur's Gate 3?
I mean, kind of guilty as charged, because like I suppose, like, for reference, there was a really big final patch like at some point, maybe like a month or two ago, and that really encouraged some of my online friends to just like start a campaign. Now, the biggest issue, and it's not an issue per se, but it is a little bit of a challenge, because the save file is on my computer. I have to make sure that like I'm playing so that everyone else can play with their characters and stuff. So I just simply haven't really had the chance. So like Clair Obscur is up there for me to actually get past Act 1 and continue, because I think it looks beautiful. From the screenshots that I've seen, I've realized, I am nowhere near like into any part of this game. So I really need to knuckle down and like give it a proper go. But honestly, Baldur's Gate has kind of taken over my very existence. And yeah, it's been a little bit harder to have play new games because of it. But I do find like as a sense of reassurance, in a way of just like, I do go back to some games for comfort. Like there is one game that I played last October that I've had for about like 6+ years, called Metahuman Inc. And it's literally just not even a visual novel. It's just like a text-based novel game. And you're the head of a company who can like give people superpowers essentially. And it's a really, really interesting type of game. And like it doesn't have any art at all. It is just pure text. And I've played it at least 6+ times, just like from start to finish. But yeah, I do find it harder to go into new things, because I do go back into older habits and just play some older games. But yes, you're 100% correct. Baldur's Gate has kind of like taken over everything.
See, your trouble there, Ben, is you want to get yourself a nice little bit of ADHD. That'll help you jump around from one game to another. I swear that's the secret to why I try so many games. It's just like I need something new.
Yeah.
I mean, your Baldur's Gate 3 experience sounds a little bit like that time I started a shared server for 7 Days to Die on my machine, and then that similarly, if anyone wanted to play on the server where they dug a load of tunnels, I would have to be online, and so that died, and I think people started one without me. So, but that's fine, because I low-key kind of hate 7 Days to Die, because I used to play it on my Twitch stream, and I put the audience participation on, and the whole thing was just a fucking nightmare, because they just kept spawning shit on top of me, and I could never get anything done. And then really, I think all it makes me realise is that perhaps I just want to play Minecraft in creative mode, because I just want to build blocks.
I really like creative mode.
Yeah, why limit yourself? I'm not going to get into it, because I'm going to make a video about it at some point. But my thoughts on survival games and the whole punch a tree to make an axe, to chop something else, to then make something else and something else and something else until you get, whatever. I'm not into that. I just want to go straight to the bit where I make the thing. That's enjoyable. So anyway,
This is why I only ever played Sims with the money cheat on, so I could just turn it into like an architecture simulator. Well, not an architecture simulator, but yeah, like a blueprint simulator.
I mean, that is an interesting topic that maybe we could add to the topic list, but like things like creative kind of modes in games, like I used to spend hours making my own or people wrestlers in one of the early SmackDown games. I once looked in is it Forza, one of the Forza games that was in the Xbox 360. When I looked in it, it would give you a breakdown of how much time you'd spent in each part of the game. And apparently I'd spent more than 3 times the amount of time in the game, in the part of the game where I designed the cars and put the decals on them than I did actually racing cars. So like, there's something interesting about like being given these sort of like creative tools within an environment and then sort of using them. But anyway, again, maybe another topic perhaps to add to the list. But before we move on, and I think as a good segue into current affairs, the other thing that I did this week is that I joined the Green Party. And so I am a paid up member of them. And I have been looking at some of the local days of action that I could go and join. So I don't know. I might go to one and see how that feels. Does anyone think it'd be a good idea if I turned up on your doorstep with someone else to tell you the good word about the Green Party in Leighton?
Where I live? I don't think, yeah.
I don't know whether I'd be like convincing in a kind of like, let me break this down for you in a geezer way, why you should vote for the Green Party. and they're not just full of
green
policies.
politics for blokes.
Yeah, exactly. But that does then lead us. Obviously, the reason I've done that is because I do agree with Zach Polanski. I agree that they should go in a more sort of, I guess, the more kind of like populist sort of direction, but for sort of left-wing policies in general. But if I'm looking at our list of current affairs, it leads us to that leadership contention. And the first point that you added, Mark, I think if you want to give us a bit of an explainer is, and I'll read the bullet point because I feel like sometimes the way we write the bullet points are quite amusing, and then we can have a more thoughtful discussion. But Caroline Lucas is a confirmed dickhead.
Yeah, I have the paperwork on my desk. We will be sending her certificate in the post promptly once I have found my inkwell for my quill. But yeah, basically, it comes down to this like no nice things for the oiks vibe that we were talking about previously. Like she's decided that, well, she's not decided, but she strongly believes that the leadership of the party has to come from within our team of MPs. Like, first of all, who? You've got like
4 of them, isn't it?
Yeah, like you've already rigged it, but like what's his face wasn't one when he became the leader, apparently.
Adrian Ramsey.
Yeah, or whatever. But it's just like, it's the, like, what do you hope to, other than not letting the oiks have nice things, what do you hope to achieve by saying, actually, only 4 people can compete for this, 2 of whom are already in it and doing the job. So one of whom is definitely said she's not running again. It's just like, it's what happened to Corbyn. Like the machinery is starting to turn on any sense of, what's the word? Like communalization. And this always happens when the machinery is under pressure from actual access, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that like once Zach starts harping on about this, then she comes out to sort of say this is like, you didn't say it, no one was saying that before. One of the things I kind of liked about the Greens is that in opposition to a lot of other parties, they do seem to run their party on a fairly up until this point, perhaps, a fairly kind of like democratic process.
Yeah.
That being that, you know, the members will vote on things and decide. So with that being the case, you know, I don't really see if the members wanted to vote Zach in, then I don't really fucking see the problem.
Well, yeah.
And I just generally believe in what he's putting out there in terms of what they need to step away from as a party. And, you know, I think we touched upon this last week as well, just the kind of, I mean, I added another bullet point to this list, which was Keir Starmer is even more of a cunt. So
every passing
I think
day.
it of course, and so I think that the reason why I back Zach and what he's putting out there is because we're watching Starmer just continually pivot to the right, which you didn't think that you could pivot. That there's only 360 degrees that you can spin it, but
it's like a physics wonder.
Yeah, but him and fucking his puppeteer Morgan McSweeney, you know, it seems like they think that the answer to everything is to chase the mythical Labour voter that has defected to reform and just become more like right wing, where you cannot out racist the racists.
Right. It's like
you're never going to be enough for those people.
Nope.
Becoming racist is their only tool. And Starmer and McSweeney seem to think that if it's not working, it's because they haven't become enough racist. So the more...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that's not going to stop him from trying, though, at the very least.
No.
No.
Well, it would require some sort of learning, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, they are learning. They're just learning the wrong message. And I don't know whether that's a case of just they're trying to work back from the result that they want rather than actually where things are going. But that's basically why I would like to back Zach, because he's, to my mind, my simple brain, it seems that he's putting forward the idea that we should essentially be doing a bit more like reform. We should, rather than keep going to the right and try and appease people, so politics of appeasement, we should be trying to make the argument for left-wing policies. We should be attacking from the left, like, you know, especially along lines of class, and especially with people like fucking Farage. We should, if you have an aggressive enough message, you should be able to make that stick with enough people, because even the fucking right-wing cunt that I don't get along with, that we have very different policy like disagreements and stuff, like the point being is, and this should be the point where we can come together, is there is a Rizzler paper between me and that person than there is between me and even fucking Nigel Farage, let alone billionaire, millionaire backers and stuff. So like, I just feel like they are at present the only real kind of legitimate option for left-wing sort of policies. You know, they not that they should become like a single issue party, but really they should put front and center the fucking wealth tax for, you know, over 10 million's worth of assets, because that is, apart from the fact that I've always voted Greens because I felt like the environment was probably humanity's greatest pressing issue, the other one that I guess definitely impacts upon that mission is wealth disparities, class disparity, like the class, the gap between people, and so they're the only party that seems to want to talk a good game on making billionaires and millionaires pay their fair share. So,
yeah, despite my constant protestations to the contrary, I do actually wish to continue existing and putting like. We're not going to be able to do much when the planet's more on fire than it is. And I get it. It sucks that from a left-wing standpoint, you have to explain why your ideas have any validity before you can even sort of bring them to the fore. But there are easy and catchy ways to do this. There are, like, how many years have we known how well marketing works and an appropriate advertisement and a good conduit for your message? Yes, you have to engage in propaganda, which people think is a dirty word. Obviously, I don't. But, like, yeah, there is that. Ultimately, it comes down to the fact that a lot of the parties that claim to be quite left-wing aren't and don't actually want to put forward left-wing solutions to anything because it will cost people. Well, it will cost certain people money. And to be clear, I mean rich people. But, yeah, you have to make the arguments in a way that people will receive them, and we know that just being the smartest man at PMQs or getting like the biggest rich kid dunk on the other guy in your fancy house isn't going to do shit, really, because if that was it, then Reform or UKIP or the Brexit Party would never have got any of the backing that they did, and they got a significant amount of backing. So they're obviously not playing the right game. But you know, I don't think they care because they're all getting what they want out of it. You know, Starmer will get his after dinner gig speaking talks where he'll make all his money, which is why I don't think he cares about getting a fucking second term in power. In fact, I think he proactively doesn't want one. But it's like you have to, like, it's not hard to say, look at what is going on. This is why it's happening. This is what we're doing. But you actually have to want to say that, and very few people do.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping Zach will make that argument.
Yeah, and I think that Zach will be more opportunistic in line with, like, you know, when I watched the whole interview of him and Jimmy the Giant, and then kind of explaining. I think it was useful to watch him talking to someone like Jimmy, who real name is Kieran apparently, which I found out
was
when I
news
watched
to
him
me.
on Downstream with Navarra, and that kind of shorted my brain out a bit. It was like, no, but you're Jimmy.
No,
anyway,
his name's Jimmy.
but like, he's a perfectly intelligent dude, but he's not the same as, I watch a lot of people who are way more intelligent than me. They're much more learned and studied in left-wing politics. Look at No Justice, Helena. She's got the kind of almost like an academic understanding of these things, whereas Jimmy is much more coming from the common man standpoint.
Yeah.
So hearing Zach explain to him his kind of thesis and how he's going to do things, and I think he understands more of how Reform have conducted themselves. For instance, we need to be a bit more streetwise, a bit more live, because look at what fucking Starmer did. He made his fucking speech about a squalid period and immigration stuff and strangers, and I don't think that he was exactly echoing the
Enoch Powell.
Enoch Powell speech, although I do think, nodding to it, Zara Sultana was like saying about how, look, when you're a politician, these things have come across your desk weeks in advance, or in advance of the event. You probably do know more than, like,
Long enough to ask a question.
In the first
but
place.
when he made those things, do you know what fucking Farage did? He came out and said Keir Starmer's gone too far on immigration. So that cunt is willing to, like, fucking nip in there and take an opportunity and capitalise on something that they're saying. And we need to be sitting there waiting
To do the exact same.
for like, you know, and we could, and I feel like, fucking hell, if you're on it, you could be just fucking banging in goals against, like, Reform all day long, because they're very good from the leadership with Farage and the way he plays the media, and they've been very good at building that thing, but they are sloppy as fuck. They're filled with just rampant bigots and racists.
Yeah, like just complete mentalists.
They're going to step on rakes everywhere they go. They're not very tidy.
Well, they've
He
already
might
lost a
be
bunch of their cancers, haven't they?
Exactly. So, I mean, he might be very kind of like, you know, he's got his shit locked down, Farage. He can't, it's very hard to fuck him over. But certainly the people that he attracts to that party that want to be MPs, they ain't trained. They're not disciplined. They're there because, you know, do you know what they always remind me of? They remind me of that time when Charlie Kirk was doing like a talk to someone, and the guy got up in the question, he's like started handing the microphone out to people in the crowd. And like this guy got up and goes, yeah, but when do we get to start using the guns? Like, they're just... The people in the party, they're just like, Nigel might have a plan to bring about a long-lasting racism, but a lot of these people that join the party, they're just like, come on, man, I want to do the racism
I just
now.
want to attack someone, yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. Ben, you have any thoughts on left-wing populism, I guess?
I think,
and when are you joining the Green Party, like me and Mark?
Yeah,
so that you can subsequently leave once they
fuck us all over again.
Two thoughts. Firstly, I do agree quite a bit with what you've been saying, in the sense that, like, opportunity is something that feels like it's never really jumped on from a leftist perspective. I feel like, from my experience, from watching British politics and also American politics, when it's come to, like, almost sensibility, I guess would be the word I'm looking for. Sensibility and just like respectability. Just like it's like the idea that like we'll always hold ourselves in like slightly higher esteem. But like I feel like the people that really, really get stuff done aren't really worried about fighting dirty or fighting quickly, because like if you have Nigel Farage saying like, oh, he's gone a step too far, my belief is I don't think that Farage really believes that, but like he knows how to play the game, and I feel like there needs to be a little bit more of playing the game from the left. And like also in terms of just like joining the Green Party, yeah, I need to, because like it is crazy looking at Labour now, looking and remembering like way back when I was actually a little bit more like, you know, in touch and just like really good at like recording my feelings. I've got like a journal entry somewhere literally writing about Labour. It's just like I remember writing about Corbyn. It's just like I remember like the joy and hope that I felt. And now looking at it now, I'm just like, oh dear. But yeah, all that is to say, like, for me, I will be joining the Green Party very soon, because like politically, I cannot really think of any other party that really aligns with what I feel or what I believe in besides the Greens at the moment.
No, party politics will always be like a fucking damage limitation exercise, but they seem like the most damage limiting.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard them say much about proportional representation, but I don't know if that's just because I've been focusing on other areas of their kind of like manifesto that I didn't really take that in. I think that is that kind of needs to be one of the next sort of steps in reforming our government structure as it is.
I would love for it.
Like, I had an argument with a friend about how first past the post is the only thing that can work, because it kind of like proportional representation is kind of like the idea it's too slow and stuff. Whereas I think actually,
is your friend secretly Caroline Lucas trying to defend the machinery?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at like first past the post, what do you get? You either get one party forms a majority government, and then you've got just one party's view of everything, and that's what they can push all through all their decisions. Or you get like a sort of a hung parliament sort of thing where no one has the real numbers to actually exact their plans, so you get a diluted kind of stunted version of something. Whereas my personal feeling is that what if more people, just like in a real life, like people like the right and the neoliberals love to kind of use examples of like households and stuff, but you know, just like in a household or a group of people, you would have to discuss and then come to compromises. And compromise is an important part of dealing with other humans and sort of. So I would like it that if maybe our politics should take a bit longer. I always say it's like Ents from Lord of the Rings. It takes a long time to say anything in old Entish. Like, it shouldn't be something that we rush.
Yeah,
we have mechanism. Yeah, we have mechanisms in government that would allow us to react quickly to things, like a pandemic, like a fucking national disaster, like something. But in terms of like deciding policies, maybe we should have longer, more thoughtful conversations, and maybe we should because then perhaps rather than thinking about what a party wants to do, if they want to get somewhere closer to where they want to be ideologically or politically, they would have to think in a different way about how they approach getting there. I know I'm going to have to kind of convince people to come to my side, which means that you approach it from a more of a place of, like I said, like you're going to have to make some concessions. You're going to have to compromise, and I feel like that's a much healthier way to kind of come to decisions. Yeah, sure, you might have to compromise with racist twats like Reform or something, but at least everyone's voice is heard, and then you can move to then, I don't know, address those points rather than just letting someone just basically shout propaganda from the sidelines and build dissent within the sort of populace against like immigrants or whatever else. But I don't know.
I mean, ultimately, it would be great for people to be able to have long discussions and come to good ideas about what's best for the country, but the system's deliberately designed to not allow that, isn't it? Like, you'll never get a good political structure in a system that's designed just to immiserate 99% of the people.
Yeah, because I feel that, like, one of the problems we have is what Ben alluded to a moment ago about, like, needing to play the game. And it is a game, but then my problem with that is that I've always just wanted, and part of the reason why I want proportional representation is that I just want people to be able to vote with their hearts. I don't want people to have to play games, because that's why I feel like you start to edge towards the Labour Party as we have it today, and all the fucking centre left and the centrists in there that kind of say, well, you're never going to do anything if you don't get power. You've got to win power before you can do things. But it seems like in order to win power, they're telling me that you have to kind of sacrifice all of your fucking morals and principles to do it. It shouldn't be a game that you have to play. Everyone should be able to go, this is how I feel, and they should be able to vote with their heart. But that's, as you just said, I think, Mark, that's not really the system that we exist within. But
not yet.
No. But before we move on to the big topic, there's one thing that I added to this list we could very quickly cover off, because there's not really anything we can actually kind of say about it that will change or enlighten anyone, but just I have just quick thoughts on, like, the fact that Israel almost won Eurovision last night. First of all, I do have a sort of shame that I actually watched it. During the day, I made excuses for myself, which was that the reason they want to be in Eurovision is they want to launder their reputation. But I don't really think it's actually worked out that well for them in general. But
if they'd quietly done well.
Yeah. And so, like you said last night in the chat, Mark, one thing that this is exposed is that where perhaps a lot of other people decided to boycott Eurovision again, all that has left is seemingly from the UK's public phone votes, all the fucking rabid Zionists and, like, the people that have been fucking Hasbara'd into, like, infinity were there to essentially vote massively in favour of Israel. And what a fucking demented shit show it would have been if they'd have won it and took it to Israel next year.
Oh my God, can you imagine? Yeah.
And I'm just saying now, boycotts are a difficult thing. I don't buy produce that comes directly from Israel, but boycotts are tricky because we're all, right now, I'm assuming, using fucking Microsoft computers. I just, like, at a certain point, you can do certain things. Like, I don't buy Sabra hummus or whatever because money would directly go to them in that sort of way. But, like, there is limitations on what kind of effect you can have. I boycotted Eurovision last year. I didn't do it this year because it's just like, is it actually having any effect? But I would like to now make the case for the fact that we should no longer boycott Eurovision. We should actively participate in it so that we can fucking screw those cunts and vote them into like a nothingness. And because, like you pointed out, Mark, last night, all the people that boycotted have left space for other people, and that's probably a big part of how they got so many votes on the public sort of stage. And so I feel like we need to make our voices heard because we need to guarantee that those pricks don't fucking win something like Eurovision, which would be kind of a massive coup for them and they would never shut the fuck up about it. But I don't know. I went on a bit of a ride last night. I was very upset. The only other thing I would bring up as a slight humorous side note is that the European public just still fucking hate us. We are.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah. Like that song was pretty good.
Thing. It was, and as I said to you last night, Mark, because we were doing our sassy little bitchy side chat where we were commenting on everyone's performances and outfits and stuff. I am the chief hater of Britain. I fucking hate it. I got like I like the people. I like stuff.
but as a concept.
Yeah, I'm not a nationalist. I'm not like, I don't have any like pride or anything like that. And like I said, that was a good song. It was certainly better than fucking Israel's, which was just fucking, by the end of all those songs, that was fucking milk toast bland bullshit.
Well, I mean, luckily we were allowed to turn it off when they came on. So at least we managed to boycott that bit.
Yeah, I mean, so, but yeah, Europe hates Britain and gave us no fucking points.
Yeah.
That is really surprising because it was genuinely pretty good song.
Yeah.
And riding off current musical hype, like people like musicals at the moment because of Wicked.
Yeah.
Very strange, but anyway. But yeah, I don't know. The complicated issue that is, first of all, boycotting things, and second of all, trying to boycott Israel, and thirdly, damn, that Hasbro machine is bloody effective, and they have pumped so much time, effort, and money into that I don't know. That was very depressing to see those kind of results because it makes you think that, like, well, does anything I do have any effect on anything? Like, I feel like general sentiment is pretty much more like people see, like even my fucking dad and mum who probably don't want to involve themselves in these kind of politics, you know, like my dad was saying to me, it's just like, well, it's very kind of obvious and clear like what Israel are doing to the Palestinians. It's not like, you know, these aren't contentious issues anymore. So I don't know. I just think that's a slightly depressing point to sort of end current affairs on, because I really don't know what happens as a result of that or what action I or anyone should really take.
Eurovision used to be laughing at how badly everyone hated us and silly Eurodance songs. And I also don't know, like, if being in Europe isn't one of the criteria, then I'm not entirely sure what is. So I don't understand how you do or don't be in the Eurovision Song Contest.
Yeah, but what a show!
Yes.
All props to the people doing all like the stage hands and stuff like that, and the stage that was essentially a fucking flat screen TV. That was fucking class. Like, I don't know what's going on there. Aside from bullshit, the pageantry was quite simply like of a level that, you know, that I could not comprehend. And
with your famed love for camp as well.
Yes. Like but Austria won, and I felt like that Austrian song was just like a haunting assault upon the senses. But I was so happy they beat Israel that even the fact that my chosen champion of the Ukrainian JoJo's Gay Adventure Ukrainian version didn't win, who I was really into. But yeah.
One final thing on the Eurovision is that I did notice that they put a particularly long skit after Israel's entry, and I'm almost certain that's because they knew that they didn't want people to...
Protesters.
Everyone that had turned off needed time to turn back in again. Is my theory.
True. And they did stick them right down the end, as far as I could see. And yeah, I would also be fascinated to see whether there's been any recordings from live in the event, because as we know from various different things, they're very good these days at like covering sounds up on live events. So I wonder whether there was way more. I mean, I felt like I could hear booing, but my disdain for the Israeli state may have been
there was booing in my
making me hear. Yeah, exactly. But anyway, perhaps we should move on to slightly lighter, but probably depressing. But at least we could take the piss out of someone in this.
A little bit easier, that's for sure. Today's topic, we have ever so lightly named "It Never Did Me Any Harm" to Electric Boomerloo. And what we're just going to be discussing is why some people think younger generation should suffer because they did in the past. The idea of some level of suffering being character building, when in real actuality they just probably need to go to therapy and sort out their own weird trauma. But yeah, no, I have plenty of thoughts on this.
Yeah, you said last week.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, why don't you kick us off? Ben,
yeah. No.
With
No, I think for me, definitely from my perspective, it's just that like it really does also depend also on just like it could be like traditional roles in terms of just like the family unit, and that the parents are seen to be as the providers and the protectors, and potentially it could also be in the sense that like because they have been assigned personally those roles when they were growing up as kids, they would see that in their own parents. They would want to reintroduce that into their own generation and for like their own children. Like the idea is just that like I know certainly, particularly with certain African households, it can be the sense that the father is the head of the family, the mother is there to support the father, but also when it comes to it, in certain aspects, the eldest can also be seen as someone who's to help the will and the goals of like their parents, but not necessarily have the same type of standing in terms of just like giving their thoughts and opinions. They can be an extra pair of hands to help the goal of the parents, but to have an opinion, not in my backyard, that's for sure. I think there was a lot of that. It's just that like, especially when parents themselves are used to just like having their own sort of way in terms of just like doing things, and it's almost like the toxic idea of toughening someone up, maybe just be like, oh, the world is shit, the world is terrible, I went through this, and it might be like some misplaced like sense of love and protection, in the sense of like, I've gone through this, I don't want you to go through this. If you have to go through this, you need to know what you're up against. And then like it builds the character. But like ultimately what happens is just that like the younger person is just fucking traumatized from like whatever they've been feeling. And they're like, why is the protector, e.g. my parents, doing this? And it just reinforces the cycle of trauma. And then at some point, the younger generation will have to work through their parents' trauma and subsequently their own. And it's really, really sad to see. I think there's a lot that can be done just to like not only just circumvent that, but eliminate it as a whole. And I think one thing that I've really, really come to love a lot more recently, especially that has been portrayed in media, and this especially is like the found family trope. Like that was, for me, I don't feel like that was something that I really saw a lot in media like when I was younger, but like these days, just like across the board, like you can't really just like get rid of your family who you're born with by blood, but you can certainly choose the circles that you surround yourself with. And I think just like that reassurance and just like seeing that a lot in media and stuff has been really, really nice, because like in that way you don't have to be stuck with that kind of environment that you have. You can kind of just build a community or something of your own. But I do think it's also something like, and I had a really, really weird way of phrasing this, but I do feel like it's almost like a, what would I say, generational, emotional version of like NIMBYism. Now, hear me out. The reason why I say that is just because like you have the concept of NIMBYism in the sense that like, this is the way we do things. We're not going to let those changes like come into this area. We want to keep this place as preserved and as okay as possible. And then I just think about like in the ways of just like with older generations, they would say, oh, I did this and I was fine. If you do it, you'll be fine. And it's just like kind of like reinforcing that type of like almost toxic mindset, I suppose. But yeah, I have many other thoughts, but also I don't want to segue too much. So I'll hand the mic over to either you, Mark, or Ian, and tell me, what do you think about this?
I think that like what you were saying there about okay, it is a cyclic thing, and I think that as creatures, I'm going to call human beings creatures because it sounds more amusing to me. But as creatures, we do kind of learn by example. But what you were saying there is that there's almost like this lack of being able to kind of step back and assess, maybe this isn't the best way of doing it. Maybe this wasn't particularly good. And perhaps there is like a comfort in having a structure. And so you're saying, this is how we did it. This is, it never did me any harm, so you should do that too. And then is that how we then sort of carry on, or we imprint that on the next generation? But so I mean, like, I'm just trying to think here about how we, because I think that you've probably had a different sort of upbringing to me, but like similar aspects of my family were kind of secular across the board, but the way in which I think my family thought things should be done was probably based broadly around the Christian faith, in terms of how the Christian faith informed generally like how we decide to sort of live our lives. Like, I feel like there was a fair amount of like, children should be seen and not heard in my family, even though I don't think anyone would like to say that that was the case. I feel like that definitely had a underlying sort of current. And even though it wasn't maybe quite as patriarchal as the way you described, like it's maybe like an African family, like there's definitely that kind of structure that's like imposed upon the sort of family unit, and then especially where you would sort of fit within that. So I think that my thing that I'm wondering about, which I don't necessarily have an answer for, but is the kind of like thinking about, because in that way, those are sort of like quite light things, like trauma, as we see with people that were sexually abused as kids, or abused in physically, often visit that trauma upon their kids and stuff. That kind of seems to happen quite a lot. But also in the way, just even if we step away from those more kind of like legitimately traumatic things or occurrences, just in terms of like even the light stuff that you were mentioning, like just teaching the next generation about how you did things. Why do we hold on to that? Like, an example of something sort of boring might be that my dad might think, well, the way you get a job is that you get a load of letters and you write loads of letters to people. But obviously that then becomes outdated very quick. Like, if you look for a job, do you fucking write a letter now? Do you go and give someone
your CV mindset is so like absolutely cooked at this point.
Do you give someone a firm handshake when you go in? Like, there's, but then we do that. Some of that is imprinted upon me, but obviously then I've learned by myself that like that is not really how things are done, because I exist in a different way. Maybe it's because I started working in tech, and very early on I realised that a tech CV is just not like other CVs. You don't have to fucking deal with this like, oh, my achievements and stuff. You just put bullet points.
Please,
I know this software. I can write this code, or I've worked in these things. I have these accreditations. Like, no, if you've ever been involved in an employment process, you know that people don't want to fuck about reading like, a wordy sort of thing. They just want to know the key words so that they can filter you through past the first phase of that, and then they can do stuff like that. So I guess that the thing is that my last thought before I pass it over to someone else to try and piece together my broken, demented sort of analogies or whatever, is that with, perhaps because I don't have kids, is it children that kind of do this? Like, you might have all these ideas about, I'm not going to do that, but like, are children, or being a parent, so inherently frightening that you immediately fall back on these things you're taught, because as a way of almost kind of coping and dealing with shit? I don't know. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm really hung up and stuck on, why, when we are
Yeah, you made a really good point as well when you were talking about like if it's also the similar thing that if that's the only thing that they've known, do they kind of go back into that cycle just because it's comforting and familiar to them? I think that's a really, really good point. I think especially in terms like these, in terms of just like making sure that you don't replicate the behavior of the unwanted behavior of your parents, there has to be a lot of introspection. And I think sometimes that also comes with the sad reality that you might be a little bit more like your parents than you might think. And like it has to do a lot with just like unpacking that type of feeling, just also acknowledging that like everything you've learned or a lot of the things you've learned will have come from friends, family, etc., but also just like trying to figure out what you want to do to like instill those values to the next generation is hard because like again like you're kind of you might be navigating it by yourself or you might be navigating it with a partner, but like everyone has their own idea of like what things should be, what things could be. And I think that like facing that reality as a person, even if you're like with a partner, is still very, very scary. All that is to say, like it can be very, very easy just to go back into old ways because you're just like you pull aside the curtain and you're just faced with like a whole other world of like decisions and choices. And that, I guess that could be scary. So some people might literally just go back to like what they're familiar with out of like being scared of the future or just like making their own way. I don't know. I know there are certainly a lot of things that I think about, like when I eventually do become a parent, there are a lot of things that I have to like be like, oh, I don't actually know how I feel about this, that I'll have to face. So that's why I'm forever glad that I discuss lots of these things with my partner now, because I'm just like, I don't actually know what I'd do in that situation. But yeah, that is a little bit of a rambling, I suppose. Mark, what do you think?
I didn't feel initially like I had a great deal to say on this, but or at least I didn't feel like I could go on a Marxist diatribe about it, but I think you've given me the lift up that I needed there. I guess, first of all, fatherhood is of absolutely no interest to me whatsoever. I don't hate kids like a lot of people seem to. I just have absolutely no interest in becoming responsible for one myself. Just don't think it's necessarily something that I'm equipped for or interested in. All that to say, a thing that I have become aware of through sort of like friends having kids and stuff like that is sort of that this concept of cycle breakers is becoming quite a big thing amongst millennial parents, sort of like trying to be aware of the cycles that our parents put in or their parents were in or stuff like that, and trying to sort of overcome that sort of default, potentially quite negative behavior. So that's nice. But secondly, and I can't remember what it was you said that sparked this particular train of thought in me, Ben, but I think it was just generally talking about the family and the setup there. And I think the nuclear family has a lot to be held accountable for, and it is a unit to reproduce sort of social structures as they are currently and extract much profit from them, but it then puts all the onus on two people who have met each other under circumstances to try and raise and configure a child in a very specific environment whereby it's by its very nature very high stress, very hard to sort of conduct oneself in a useful and beneficial manner outside of just getting some money. And it's hardly surprising that people look at their parents as models for behavior, because the nuclear family doesn't encourage external opportunities to model behavior in other people. And, it sort of reaffirms this idea that you look at your parents and you behave like your parents as you grow through life. I mean, there's also aspects of it being a trauma response here. And when you end up in a situation, your sort of nervous system defaults to a certain approach. And if you've had an awful childhood, it's not a surprise that you are going to try and defend yourself against accusations of sort of monstrous behavior and also perpetuate those at the same time. Because the cognitive dissonance there is like, it's going to be real, right? And your psyche is always trying to protect itself from ultimately annihilation via sort of ostracization or lack of access to things or blah, 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 whatever. But this is why we protect ourselves. And yeah, those defense mechanisms are very strong. Obviously, it doesn't justify the behavior, but in times of extreme stress, you're going to go to the thing that ultimately didn't end up in someone dying when you were a kid. And often these, like, our brain constructs these like pretty awful situations as, this is what happened and we all survived. So I guess that's just what I've got when it's fight or flight mode. So yeah, it's like, again, I suppose it comes down to what we've said every other time. It comes down to what do you have access to? Although in this time, it's sort of, do you have access to a wider amount of role models whose behavior might be better, might be more conducive to a harmonious environment, who might be able to explain how to analyze your own behavior to you? And do you have access to the type of resources that are required to, analyze your own behavior, the sort of education to do it, moments to reflect, money to access therapy, all of that kind of stuff? And when all of those things are not available and everything's fucked, you default to what did the least amount of damage, and then you attempt to justify it to yourself. Well, not even just justify. Sometimes you'll attempt to justify it to yourself. Sometimes you will take that very boomer kind of, well, we got through. It's like, yeah, but are you thriving? Do you feel like you're thriving, boomers? So yeah, that's my take on it.
I mean, ironically, they are, because they've got all the fucking money
Well, that's true,
and all the property and everything. But anyway, I think that, like, not to sound too like right wing, because right wingers always love to go to like nature as a more, for them, it's more like a justification of why I should be a massive cunt, because it's survival of the fittest. But what I will say on a kind of a biological level, it feels like it is both, obviously, passing down knowledge and habits is a very effective tool of our species for ensuring that next generation happens, that people like survive and stuff like that. But also, perhaps the thing that makes it easy to like reinforce learnings from one generation to the other is also kind of a bit against being able to be a little bit more objective about, is that doing us much good? And so therefore bad habits will also get passed on in amongst that sort of reinforcement of, probably why we learn from examples of our parents and stuff like that. I think that what we've been talking about here is the kind of like the charitable understanding version or part of, like, it never did me any harm, why parents pass on things and generational traumas and stuff. Because, like we said, it is undoubtedly, being a parent is obviously probably quite fucking terrifying and scary. Like, I don't know. I can never answer this question, because society is, I think, imprinted on me into some level that I should want to be a parent. And I can't say that there's some part of me that is not against it, but I just personally think that like whenever I don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about kids. Like, and I feel like I've always said, I spend more time thinking about getting a little dog than anything else. So like, it's not on my mind. I'm consumed by thinking about what I will create next. So I'm just, maybe I'm either too selfish or just not interested. But even though I'm not interested, any thoughts I have are purely as a result of being imprinted upon the perceived way that I should do things as a human being, that other people want me to have children. But aside from that, so we've been quite sort of understanding of the challenges, but I would like to move us into a more slightly more derisory and sort of like where we start like fucking slagging off the kind of weird sort of attitude. So I've made some points here on my little personal notes for this episode. And there's a couple of things I'm going to mention, and then I will throw it back to you both to sort of like give your thoughts on it. So one is the whole thing about work-life balance. And I've put here that older generations can't handle the fact that they are cucks to the system and they want other people to suffer. Like, oh, well, like, so my thinking here is when you've seen typically in recent times, there was that TikTok of that girl who's just going into the workforce. She's working probably a lower paid job. She's having to travel in America. She's spending like 2 hours each way traveling or whatever. And then she's got no time for doing anything or being a person or herself. And she's really upset about it. And it's like all the fucking boomers in the chat just go like, well, sorry, cupcake, that's just life and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, I don't like this idea of like why have older generations seem to have accepted that? I know at some level you all have to fucking accept it because unfortunately we live in a capitalist system, therefore we have to go to work and we have to earn money because otherwise we just won't be able to fucking live. But this, like, I don't know, like, I don't like this attitude from like boomers or older generations of like almost like, well, why should you fucking expect anything more? It does feel like a very cucked sort of attitude to like, you know, it's like, who are you doing this for? The fucking, your boss, CEO of a fucking company that gives no shits about you? My second thing is that in a similar vein is like the concept of like student debt forgiveness. This idea that like, less so like in the first one, which is the first one example is a little bit more, it didn't do me any harm. This one is a little bit more just kind of like the concept of not wanting someone to have something better because you didn't have it. Like, and is that just spite? Is that just jealousy?
Yeah,
like,
it's very politics of spite, isn't it?
Like Mark, in the first episode we did, you talked about your sort of like your Buddhist faith, like spiritualism and that sort of way, and you talked about the concept of like doing things to make things better for those that come after us, sort of thing. I'm very paraphrasing down your eloquent sort of like spiritual thoughts into something short and sort of butt-headish, but like I'd be perfectly happy. I mean, I didn't go to university, but I'd be perfectly happy for future generations not to have to fucking pay for something that I did. Like, that's the price of progress. Like, what are you going to do? Like, that is ultimately, it's just a very selfish way of thinking about things, isn't it? Like, which then leads me to my next bullet point, which is a variation of that, which is something that I think that the UK suffers from quite badly. It's just a country, let alone like the boomer generation, but the kind of crab bucket mentality of like when you have crabs in a bucket, as one starts to like approach the lip of the bucket to climb out, other crabs will grab them and pull them down. Now it's probably because they're trying to get out as well, and they're just pulling them down as a result. But this idea that we do have this idea of like, well, like it's an extension of that student debt forgiveness type thing of like, well, I didn't get that. You don't deserve that either. Like we all should, like it essentially like becomes a zero-sum game where we all have to just fucking deal with, I don't know, we shouldn't have nice things, like, which I feel like we've mentioned a few times, different things in different ways. And then the last thing that I'll just say for points for people to sort of give me their thoughts on is just like recently when I went up to stay with my parents, we ended up having like a conversation and something came out about like, I think it was more about being out and playing as children, like in old wastelands and stuff like that. Like, I mean, that sounds like fucking, we're talking about Fallout or something, but like bits of old, like, you know, recreational ground that were just sort of shitty, and climbing trees, and there being, but this, what I'm getting to here is this kind of idea. It feels like older generations making arguments against like health and safety or regulating things. I don't know if it's because they just see it as like more bureaucracy and they don't like that, or do they see it as, is there a bit that they can't identify or be honest with themselves, which is like, do they feel not as loved by society and everyone around them because people didn't pay them as much attention? No one was worried about whether you put a fucking helmet on when you rode a bike. Like, is there something like that? Or but like, it does seem like people are just sort of, older generations feel like you're being coddled because they want to put in place standards which protect you from fucking really hurting yourself. And my mum said something like, oh, well, like, I didn't hear about people, like, we didn't have all those things, and I never heard about people like hurting themselves. It's like, yeah, but like, why would you hear about it? Doesn't mean that people didn't fucking die from accidents in concrete playgrounds or something or whatever. And it's a little bit like when we had COVID and some people were like, well, I don't know anyone that's died from COVID. It's like, well, that's fucking nice for you. But definitely some people did, like millions of them, in fact. So it's like, I don't know, this, is there something there about like how we perceive the world? We're not very good at perceiving things outside of our own immediate experience. But yeah, why are they against work-life balance, or this idea that you, like, who are we working for? Because it ain't a fucking communist state. So we ain't doing it for the betterment of the people. We're doing it for fucking capitalism, which is the saddest, most cucked thing I've ever heard of. And then things about student debt forgiveness and not wanting future generations to have nice things, whether that is debt forgiveness or safety measures so that they don't fucking hurt themselves.
I feel like there are a couple of things there, and like the two really reoccurring themes that I've kind of highlighted is just lack of introspection and also survivorship bias, I guess. And I think one of the biggest reasons why I say survivorship bias is just because your example, obviously, like with COVID, was a really clear and easy one. But with the example that you gave with your parents and just them saying, oh, we never really heard of anyone getting hurt. It's just, I suppose it's because if anything didn't really happen to them, then surely everything is working as intended. So that therefore anything else that is happening just feels like it's almost like coddling to the masses.
Yeah, they didn't see the planes that didn't come back.
Yeah, precisely. And like, it's really funny because like, I am a nervous flyer. Like, I know this, my wife knows this, the algorithm knows this because it shows me videos of like crashing planes before I get on the plane.
God.
But like, it's really interesting because like I want to have that conversation, but it's like, oh, I'm kind of nervous getting a plane, and then it's just like, oh, the plane crashes are just like they don't happen that much. That there are more planes that just get through and are absolutely okay. The safety numbers are there, but I'm also like, yeah, we've experienced all the planes working, but all it takes is for one single time for the plane to not work, and then suddenly there's 2 people in this podcast instead of 3. Like, it's just that idea that like, just because I myself have not experienced the pain or the difficulty, and if I'm happy with my immediate circle, I'm not really going to think about that. Doesn't mean that it's not happening, like just outside of my immediate circle. But if you're happy, and I really do think this goes back to Mark's point about like resources and just like the availability. If you're happy with what you've got, and like the people closest to you are happy with what they've got, like, why would you really need to feel the need to like have that peek further into the curtain and see like, oh, actually, there's something not right here. It's almost just like having that immediate needs like getting satisfied. That's my very nice way of putting it. But also, like, I do feel like there's also like a slightly mean-spirited type of like version as well, where people might be jealous of like these, like, of the acknowledgements that like actually the systems that you were raised in weren't actually properly good for you. You survived, you thrived in spite of it, but we're also going to be adjusting to make these changes for the future generation. It might be the case that like they somewhere deep down might actually know that it was actually really shit and really difficult to actually like live. And they might have a little bit of resentment because that they weren't given the type of attention or care or just like focus that like other people are getting given now.
Is it a little bit like like a double down scenario, like Brexit or something? Like when you're proven to be wrong, you just don't want to like you grew up believing something that it was right and that this is the way you did things, and then suddenly someone comes along, especially if it's the younger generation, and says, actually, that's not very good. Like you're forced to try and confront everything that you believed was true and right, and now suddenly it's not. Like so, like when I was saying Brexit, there, it's kind of the idea of like, you know, and I don't want to get drawn on Brexit because, like, I don't know, I think it was a bad idea, but I can see arguments for why people don't want to be associated with the European Union, or why they would like to, in my eyes, change the European Union to not be such a big fucking cunty organisation as such as it is. But like this idea that we just can't. It's in some way, it's just like, is it just as simple as, like you said, Ben, like jealousy? Like it's a level of jealousy and not wanting to admit that you lived your life by certain rules, and now people have figured out, well, we don't actually need to live our lives by those rules. We could do it in a different way. Maybe it's better. And you're kind of like, if you're the older generation, is there an element that makes you feel like, well, what have I been doing with my time? Like, especially when you go back to my example of like being a cuck to like the system. Like if I tell, like, is that why my mum and dad don't like it when I start fucking harping on about capitalism and stuff? Because am I reminding them or people of that age that like you've spent your whole life in service of this pointless fucking thing, and here is your son or this younger person saying that's bullshit. That's like, what a fucking waste of time. It's in a roundabout way, not directly, but like, is it making you have to confront that like, oh yeah, why did I do this?
I do have a wholesome example for this actually. And it's something that I've actually said to you guys privately, maybe like a week or maybe 2 weeks ago. I think it's just like, you did kind of hit the nail on the head here, Ian, when you were talking about people have lived their lives a certain way. Like for me, like before I started this podcast and like talking with you, like, yeah, I would have like the one-off conversation about like, oh, this thing is happening in the political sphere. This is really disappointing. This is also happening. But like before I actually really started this time here that we have with you, I didn't really get like a chance to just sit and be like, oh, you know what? This is shit. Let's talk about it. So I think it's just that like when people are faced with that realization, they can either be met with like, they can either meet it with a lot of joy, or it could be like the biggest crash out of their lives because they've realized that like they didn't have to do that in the first place. Like I think like from my example, I'm just like, every time that I jump on here and hit record, I'm just so excited. But for other people in different circumstances, whether it be like from like understanding their own identity, or just like the way that they live, or like how they've navigated their lives and careers, that could be like a really, really hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, the truth is hard to swallow. Like, I'm gonna. The other week, you gave the example of Toy Story 2 as like a reference to something, which, like, but you were saying about like, and I was saying about like the truth is like hard to swallow, and that's probably why we want to avoid having to own up to it. And it made me think of that film Paul. Is anyone?
Oh, with the alien,
the fucking alien. I think it's Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. But there's a bit where there's a really devout evangelical Christian, and she keeps going, "Oh, you're not real," and she's like shouting and hollering, and Paul wants her to shut up, and he like puts his hand on her head or something, and he basically just like fucking zaps the knowledge of the universe into her, and then suddenly she has to reckon with the fact that all of her faith means nothing because now she I don't know whether God exists. Let's not get into that. But in this universe, in the film, thematically, he basically blows her world apart. And suddenly she's like, well, I know that, like, I now know that God, I know how the universe started. I know that God doesn't exist. And it's like that. I think that the truth can be, and again, this might bring us back around to the concepts of trauma. It's too traumatic to have to deal with like the reality of things, especially when you combine that with things like children, families not having enough time to think about these things and sort of rationalize them. You've just got to keep moving forward. It's your job to look after these kids, keep everyone alive and stuff. And I just think that it's like the truth just hurts, and having to face that truth, no matter where it comes from, is, which in some ways I feel like people like myself and maybe Mark, who like don't plan to have kids and have this time, maybe quite depressingly, to philosophize around like life and the way we learn things, the way the systems work, are probably good candidates to maybe have children to like impart such knowledge onto the next generation. But like, as I said, I just think I might be too selfish for that, and I'm too thinking of like video games too much. But
so what we should do is make a commune and go from there. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I'm into the idea of like they've floated it a few times, like these multi-generational. So like if you had like these kind of like blocks of flats where maybe you had like a courtyard in the middle, you've got old people living amongst young families, people like exchange their worth. Like, you know, old people can babysit, people can help old people, because this is a thing that we need to do. Like, as we get older, we're going to need care and stuff like this, and which goes back to, you know, things that Keir Starmer's doing now and the government, which aren't particularly helpful for the crisis that's coming. But like, like so actually you've just made me think then, is that something? Is it perhaps also something to do with how we naturally separate out generations? Like, what if, like, I don't spend any time around any old cunts. Like, I don't. Like, all my grandparents are dead. Like, I don't, like, you know, like, sometimes I see my parents and that, but like, I don't know, like, there is stigmas attached for, like, I mean, it gets a little bit dicey when you go the other way, because none of us should be hanging around with young children, but like, especially that are on our own. But I don't know, like, if we maybe in a more communal living scenario, like a commune, perhaps there would be more, you know, maybe there was like, and actually, I don't know whether this is the case, because I am not part of any like, sort of like, I don't know what the fucking PC term with this, but like any kind of like minority communities or anything. I'm not Muslim. I'm not black. I'm not from any of these communities, but I know like in things like, you know, Muslim and sort of like South Asian communities, you have a lot of like people call everyone uncle or auntie, like a lot. Like, is that just because it's just a turn of phrase, or is that because there is more of this sense of connection between different people outside of the family unit? And I mean, there's probably some problematic stuff around patriarchal power structures, maybe in terms of how you view uncle, but like, is there more of a community and you know these people and you don't just go to your parents for learning? You have more people around. I think I'm going into another place, but I don't know, bringing it back, the whole communal living thing, breaking down the barriers between different generations, because you know what? I think one thing we forget is that old people were young once. And they've probably got some fucking fascinating things to tell us. But, and then maybe, it works in two directions. Perhaps people wouldn't become so fucking rigid and calcified and like racist and sort of like bigoted if they were connected at all levels together. Do you know what I mean? So like because you're, it's what you're exposed to. Like if you're exposed to other cultures and other races and other modes of being, then those things aren't strange and scary. But so I really don't know where I've gone with this, but like I do like what you're saying about sort of like communal living, and I don't know whether that could address a lot of the more mean-spirited, more sort of jealous elements of it didn't do me any harm.
Like from my perspective, I would say but yeah, I think just like not having things in isolation always helps. And I think that's why I will forever try and build a commune. All I need to do is win the lottery a couple of times, I'm sure, at the scale that I want it to do it at. But I think you hit the nail on the head. Just like it is about exposure. It is about people experiencing different viewpoints, but also not working in a silo and making sure that their needs are kind of met. It's just like if you're not worried about like where the next rent payment is coming from or anything like that, and like you are quite secure and you have the opportunity to just like really just be around other people just like to help out, just like when they're not like fearing for just like living from paycheck to paycheck essentially. Like one example I'll give really quick is just that I went to visit my wife's auntie, but not really the auntie, but like kind of just like a very close family friend. But that is similar to what you said, Iain. Just like they use the term like auntie as a form of endearment. And we just went over. We had like a cup of tea with like coffee and walnut cake, and we also just like did a little bit of like gardening. I am not a green thumb by any stretch of the imagination, but we planted like some chili seeds, spring onions and stuff like that. And just like and we refilled the bird feeder, and like all of these things I don't like ever do. But like she really loved it because we were there for the company, and she told us some really, really interesting stories about like her time, like when she was little, and like when she was like, she had to relocate because of just like everything that was happening in World War II. Like she told us like some really amazing stories, but just like having that opportunity just to connect with someone and just like be there, like I do feel like a lot of these feelings can be just, a lot of these negative feelings can be just like simply blown away just by having that community aspect.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just adding to the big list of topics why Thatcher is a cunt as a topic, because I feel
surprised
like
that wasn't on there.
It is a good point,
kind of
actually.
was in a roundabout way. We've got a topic on there for like, do not my friends become addicted to water, because talking about like, the privatisation of like services. So the words,
I suppose her ghosts and everything back.
I suppose the words why Thatcher is a cunt are actually in there, but maybe this would be a good topic to actually tackle in terms of, because a lot of this stuff, I mean, and I am like a not lonely person. What's the word? That's not the wrong word. I don't like people. Like I like to spend a lot of time on my own. And so, or just with a small amount of people. I'm not going to particularly good at community organising, although like we've spoke about it before, that is very important. But I do understand that community it's been lost. And it's fucking Thatcher's fault because it's Thatcher and Reagan and this whole thing about the individual.
No such thing of community.
Exactly. That it has fucking ruined us and we need to kind of get that back. I don't know how we do it. You know what I mean? But let me just figure why Thatcher is a cunt. But yeah, I think that's we should leave that for another discussion. But that is, I think it's integral to this as well. I mean, it's not integral to just why we pass down trauma and stuff like that. I mean, one last thing I'll say, like, because one of our very few listeners we have is my partner, and she commented on the fact that, like, it made her have a thought about when she heard what the topic was about how experiencing generational trauma doesn't really ensure that you learn any lessons from it. And she cited the example of, like, that Holocaust survivor who goes back or talks to his family over in Israel at the moment, and they ain't learned a fucking thing out of like what the experience that happened to them. Again, we've got that down on the list as another topic of, which is going to be one of the most fucking strained and awkward topics we'll ever talk about, probably, Israel, Palestine. But, like, generational trauma don't seem to guarantee that you'll learn any good lessons from it. So I don't know, maybe a balance to that is to reclaim a sense of community and kind of, like, change this way of thinking and living that we've seemed to have got ourselves in. Like, shared responsibility for the raising of kids, because, you know, I mean, there's a lot to be said for having people that aren't your immediate family for emotional support or advice. Like, Ben, you mentioned right at the beginning of this about the idea of chosen families or found families. I've always lent on my friends for emotional support way more than my parents. My parents would be the nuclear option when shit got really bad and I was really upset. Then I'd go to my parents for, like, actual material help and sort of, like, you know. But in terms of, like, if I wanted to talk about how I was feeling, I'd always go to my friends. So, like, I don't know. I think it is important to have lots of, again, going back to that thing you were saying about exposure, lots of exposure to different people, different ideas. Perhaps that's one of the drawbacks of the classic nuclear model of your father, the patriarch, or whatever the system is, passes down that information and this is the way he wants it done. And then you're there to help reinforce that, and then you just naturally do that, and then so on and so forth. Perhaps it is a product of that model is quite narrow and maybe works in a very primal way to just ensure continuation, but actually in a more philosophical and a more sort of impactful and sort of useful way for the broader we. Perhaps something more communal, more community-based is what we actually need. And that's when we build my curiosity centres that we mentioned, and in Ben's commune that he's going to make. Which
it's going to be such a great commune.
I mean, I don't want to be like shit on your parade or anything, but, like, I've watched a fair amount of Walking Dead episodes, and all I know is whenever someone gets a good thing going, some prick always comes and ruins it. So we're just going to have to build a really big wall to keep the pricks out. But yeah. Mark, do you have any final thoughts, I think, before we should roll for next week's conversation? Or has this just caved your mind in and now you've got nothing but depressing thoughts about society?
No, do you know what? It's been music to my ears to listen to someone else be like, we should do a commune. It's like, oh, was that me? Did I? No, someone else suggested it. So yeah, like
little kind of like
communes
little
and
pockets.
Communes and your curiosity centres.
Yeah, exactly.
Completely on board with it. Mega City one.
Yeah,
I'm so down. So, to all our listeners, we've decided to make a small, minor change to the way that we're going to roll for conversation. So, previously we were using a percentile dice, which was 0 to 100, but just to keep in line with, like, actually rolling a fun dice, and, of course, the amazing icon that Iain made, we're going to roll a d20 instead. And what will happen in that circumstance is just that whenever we discuss a topic, that topic will be replaced and with a different topic from that number. So
yeah, I'm very sorry. The D20 was nice and round and fitted, and I kind of went ahead and just made a load of branding before I realised that we don't actually roll a D20. So yeah, apologies, but I think we need to be thematically and brand consistent.
And that certainly works for me. So instead, I'm going to roll my multicolored dice as a little bit of purple, gold, and green. And let's see what we get here. So for next week's topic, we have... Ooh, what's this? Oh, 5. Can I keep my politics out of gaming? Is the apolitical political, actually? This one obviously will be discussing getting politics out of games, but not the politics I like. Is that really possible? And also, why is everyone so dumb? And is it all politics, no matter which way you slice it? Which I've got some very, very, very big thoughts about. And honestly, from my perspective, all art is an extension of people's politics. But we'll leave that for next week's session, because if I go on...
Save it for next week, then. Don't give them anything.
We'll go from there. But the most important thing that everyone can do as we wrap up is if you can just go ahead and give this a listen, give us a rating on all the respective... all the respective streaming services, and please don't hesitate to check out our socials in the link below. But that's us for now. I hope you have a really, really good day, and hopefully you'll hear from us soon.